The morning I handed Colton his coffee, kissed him goodbye, and told him I loved him, he was already lying to my face. I just didn't know it yet. Our penthouse on the 38th floor of the Marquette Tower looked like something out of an interior design magazine. Which, honestly, it had been. Floor-to-ceiling windows running the full length of the living room. Lake Michigan sprout like hammered silver beyond the glass. The Chicago skyline framing the bedroom on the opposite side. I had bought the unit 4 years before. Colton and I were married. During the first year, I made partner at Holt & Brennan. I'd paid cash for the renovations, picked out every fixture, argued with 3 different contractors about the kitchen island placement until I got it exactly right. Colton always said it was the most beautiful home he'd ever lived in. He should have been grateful. Looking back, I wonder if that was part of the problem. I'm Nadia, 38 years old, litigation partner at one of Chicago's top family law firms. The irony of that, spending my career helping other women dismantle marriages while mine was rotting quietly from the inside, is not lost on me, not even slightly. I met Colton at a fundraiser 7 years ago. He was charming, effortlessly so, the kind of man who could make a room full of strangers feel like old friends within 20 minutes. He was working in mid-level advertising at the time, restless, genuinely talented, but stalled. When a senior position opened in the marketing and communications division at my firm's affiliated consulting group, I made one phone call. Within 3 months, Colton was the creative director of the entire division. I didn't think of it as doing him a favor. I thought of it as building something together. He wore a charcoal suit to his first day, kissed me on the cheek on the way out the door, and said, "Watch out, Chicago." I laughed all the way to the elevator. For 5 years, we were good. I won't rewrite history. Dinner at Smith on our anniversary, weekend drives up to Lake Geneva when my caseload allowed, slow Sunday mornings with the papers spread across the kitchen island. Colton handled the social calendar I never had time to manage. He remembered every birthday, sent flowers to my colleagues when they had babies, remembered my assistant's elderly mother's name. I trusted him the way you trust gravity. It never occurred to me that gravity could simply be turned off. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Colton had always been relaxed about his phone, left it face up on the counter, handed it to me to read directions when he was driving, didn't flinch when I accidentally grabbed the wrong device off the nightstand. Then, sometime around last February, all of that changed. The phone went face down the moment he set it anywhere. He started sleeping with it plugged in on his side of the bed instead of on the charging pad in the hallway where it had lived for years. He took calls in the bathroom. Long ones. At 11 at night. I told myself he was stressed about the Devereux account, a major rebranding campaign his division was running. I was handling a brutal custody trial, working 70-hour weeks, running on 4 hours of sleep, and whatever I could grab from the Pret around the corner from the courthouse. It was easy to blame exhaustion on both sides, but I'm a litigator. I notice things. It's not a switch I can turn off. The late nights started in March. 2 or 3 times a week, Colton would text around 4 in the afternoon. West Coast client calls, approval rounds on creative assets, can't leave yet, don't wait up. I'd come home to an empty penthouse, heat up whatever the housekeeper had left. Eat alone at that kitchen island I'd fought so hard to position exactly right. The third time I offered to send dinner to his office, I happened to be 2 blocks away. I called his direct line. His assistant answered. She sounded surprised to hear from me. Colton had left, she said, around 5:30. I stood on the sidewalk in 30-degree wind and said, "Of course, I must have gotten the timing wrong." And I ended the call. I went home. I ate alone. I said nothing. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing our household Amex statement when my eyes stopped on a charge from a spa in River North. Woodhouse Day Spa, $340. On a Tuesday afternoon when I was in court, I hadn't been to that spa in over a year. I called next morning and said I was confirming an appointment from that date. The receptionist said she showed a service for 2. Couples massage and facial package. I hung up before she finished the sentence. I'm good at sitting still. Courtrooms teach you that. Holding every reaction behind a neutral face while your mind moves is at 100 miles an hour. I looked at the charge from every angle. There was no angle that came out clean, but I needed more than one data point. What I found next was Bryn. She was a junior associate on the consulting side, had joined the firm's affiliated group about 8 months earlier, fresh from a graduate communications program. Early 20s. pretty in a way that always seemed slightly effortful. I'd seen her in the elevator once or twice and assumed the nerves around me were standard junior staff anxiety about named partners. The day the picture clicked into focus, I was walking back from a client lunch with my colleague Tamsin. We passed Colton's office corridor, and through the glass panel I saw them. Bryn perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, leaning forward, saying something that made Colton throw his head back and laugh. His hand rested on the surface between them. As I watched, her fingertips moved across the desk until they were resting against his. I kept walking. Tamsin was mid-sentence about something. I kept nodding, kept my pace, kept my face exactly where it needed to be. I didn't turn around. But I remembered everything. The confirmation came 6 weeks later, and it didn't come quietly. I was in Columbus for a deposition, 2 days with a high-conflict custody client, full schedule, staying at the downtown Hilton. Second evening, I was on the phone with my assistant going through morning prep when a text came in from Tamsin. 3 words. Call me now. I called. Pull up Instagram, she said, without preamble. Bryn Calloway. I ended up on her close friends list by accident. She must have added me when she followed the firm's alumni page. Nadia, she stopped. She's live right now, from your penthouse. The floor dropped out from under me. I found the profile, active story. I tapped it. The view was unmistakable. I had stared at that particular configuration of glass and city light from that exact corner of my living room for 4 years. The bend of the river. The Hancock building framed at a slight angle. My custom walnut shelving along the north wall. All of it visible behind Bryn as she lounged across my white sectional in a robe I recognized. Not because it was expensive, but because I'd bought it in Sonoma years ago, and it had a small ink stain on the left sleeve that housekeeping had never fully lifted. She was wearing my robe, holding a glass from what was clearly my wine refrigerator, and she was talking to the camera, laughing, calling someone baby off screen. Then she looked directly into the lens and said, with a little smile that I will never in my life forget. Tell his wife I said hi from her penthouse. Actually, don't. She probably thinks he's working late. Then she tilted her glass at the camera, and the story ended. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for 4 minutes. I counted them. 4 minutes of absolute stillness while something inside me went cold and locked into place. Then I opened my laptop. My deposition was at 9 the next morning. I worked until 1 a.m. so that every document was prepared, every question sequenced, every exhibit tabbed. I would not let this destroy my client's case. I am a professional. I would remain one. When I finally closed the laptop, I made one phone call. To my father. Bernard picks up on the second ring. Always. He's 71, a retired federal judge, the most disciplined man I have ever known, and the one person in my life who has never once told me to calm down when calm was not the appropriate response. I need to tell you something, I said. I told him everything, sequentially, without editorializing. The phone behavior, the late nights, the spa charge, Bryn's hand on the desk, the Instagram live stream. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. What do you need from me? He said. That's my father. Not are you sure? Not maybe there's an explanation, just, what do you need? 2 more weeks, I said. I'm building a case. He told me he'd clear his calendar. I returned to Chicago the following afternoon and moved with the same precision I bring to trial preparation. I retained a private investigator I had worked with, professionally on custody matters. Discreet, thorough, expensive, worth it. I quietly contacted my personal banker at First Midwest and separated my individual accounts from anything jointly accessible, leaving only enough in the shared account to look undisturbed. I reviewed the prenuptial agreement with fresh eyes and found exactly what I had drafted it to say. Every asset owned or earned under my sole income, before and during the marriage, was protected entirely. Colton had signed it without reading it carefully. I know because he'd asked me afterward if there was anything important in it. I told him there was a lot of boilerplate. I wasn't wrong, I was simply incomplete. I also, and this required the most sustained self-control of my adult life, continued to act like nothing had changed. Coffee in the morning, questions about the Devereaux campaign, dinner across from him, laughing at the right places. I love you before bed, every single night, seamless. Inside, I was building the demolition plan. The opportunity came from Colton himself. Every April, I host the firm's annual Client Appreciation Gala, 400 guests, black tie, the ballroom at the Chicago Athletic Association. I plan it personally. My name is on every invitation. It is, without exaggeration, the most visible evening of my professional year. Colton had helped me coordinate logistics on it for 3 years. He knew the venue, the layout, the timing. He also, as my investigator confirmed, had told Bryn about the event. Specifically that I would be fully occupied with hosting duties from 6 o'clock onward and wouldn't notice if he slipped out early. He had reserved a room at the Kimpton Gray Hotel 2 blocks from the venue. Dinner for 2 at Maple and Ash. My investigator sent me the reservation confirmation on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting at my desk, 20 yards from Colton's division's floor. I forwarded it to Bernard. His reply came in 40 seconds. Saturday night, I'll be there. The night of the gala, I dressed with particular care. Black Armani, the structured column gown I'd bought in New York the previous fall and never worn because I'd been saving it for the right occasion. Diamond drops my father gave me when I made partner. Hair up. I arrived at the venue at 5:30 and worked through setup, greeted early arrivals, moved through the room the way I always do. Like I belong to every conversation because I genuinely do. At 7:15, I excused myself to check with catering. My phone buzzed. Bernard, East Entrance, he's with her. I finished the conversation with the catering manager. Then I walked, unhurried, toward the East Corridor. I saw Colton before he saw me. He was standing near the bar with Bryn, who was wearing a dress from Intermix, the same one I had seen saved to her Instagram collection 6 weeks ago, when I had at that point begun researching her comprehensively. The dress probably cost $300. The credit card it was purchased on was joint. Bryn saw me first. The color left her face so completely and so fast that I almost pitied her. Colton turned. The expression on his face wasn't guilt, not primarily. It was the specific terror of a man who had been absolutely certain he would never be caught, realizing with full force that he was wrong about that. I walked up to them. I held my champagne glass steady. I looked at Bryn first. Bryn, I said pleasantly, I'm glad you could make it. I wasn't aware you were on the guest list. We should fix that. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I looked at Colton. The room at the Kimpton is in your name, I said. The same tone I used to confirm deposition schedules. Don't worry about the cancellation fee. I've already called. They were very understanding. Nadia. I want you to know, I said, that I found out about this in a hotel room in Columbus, Ohio, while I was preparing for a deposition. I sat still for 4 minutes. Then I went back to work. Because that is what I do. By then, Tamsin had moved into position near the South Bar, and a radius of quiet was expanding around us as the closest guests registered that something was happening. I reached into my clutch and set 2 items on the bar between us. The key fob to my Audi RS7, purchased outright, titled in my name alone, which Colton had been driving to his weekends away for the past 6 weeks, and a folded copy of the amended divorce petition my attorney had filed that afternoon. The Audi is in valet, I said. I've already retrieved my key. You can arrange your own transportation from the front desk. I glanced toward the lobby. You should also know the Penthouse access code has been changed. The building manager has your photo. And your personal items from the guest closet have been sent to a storage pod, forwarded to your mother's address in Naperville. Because I wasn't sure where else you'd have them delivered. His voice cracked. You can't do this here. I could have done it in private, I agreed, but Bryn told me to say hi from my penthouse, so I thought public was fair. Several phones came up around us. I didn't stop them. I held Colton's gaze for 3 full seconds. There was nothing in it I needed. No explanation that would change the arithmetic of what he'd done. No version of his face that owed me anything I still wanted. I picked up my champagne glass, turned, and walked back into the ballroom. Bernard was waiting near the stage. He put one hand briefly on my shoulder, the same way he had when I passed the bar exam, when I won my first bench trial, when my mother died. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The gala ran until 10:30. I stayed for every minute of it. I gave the closing remarks. I thanked the staff by name. I danced one song with a senior partner whose wife I adore. No one watching me from across would have seen a woman whose marriage had ended 2 hours earlier. But I knew. And that was the only audience that mattered. Colton called 11 times before midnight. I routed the number to voicemail without listening to a single message. By Friday of the following week, he was terminated from the consulting division. Not through any call I made, but through a formal HR complaint documenting workplace misconduct and the conflict of interest created by a director's relationship with a junior employee. The clause was in his original agreement. Bryn resigned the week after that. The divorce took 8 weeks. We had no children, and the prenuptial agreement left very little room for argument. Colton's attorney tried. Mine was ferocious. The filing was dismissed. He walked away with what he'd had when we met: the contents of his personal bank account, his own car, and his reputation, which had become considerably smaller. The penthouse renovation took 6 weeks. New sectional, guest suite repainted, the rug replaced. Every surface that had absorbed someone else's presence, gone. When it was finished, I stood at the living room window at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday with a glass of wine and looked at Lake Michigan, doing what it always does, existing, indifferent to human mess. And I took the first clean breath I'd had in months. A year and a half later, on a Saturday morning at the Division Street Farmers Market, Tamsin appeared at my elbow while I was holding a paper bag of peaches. "I just need to tell you one thing," she said, "and then we're getting brunch and not discussing it again." She'd run into Bryn's former roommate. Bryn had moved back home to her family in Indiana sometime in the spring. She'd tried to find work in Chicago's marketing sector and hadn't managed it. Her name had circulated through the professional community in the quiet, efficient way those things move. The last anyone knew, she was working at a chain restaurant and running a food blog without much traction. As for Colton, Tamsin had seen him 3 weeks before at a networking event. He was freelancing. He looked, she said carefully, like someone who had not been sleeping. I stood there with my peaches and thought about the man who used to say our penthouse was the most beautiful home he'd ever lived in. "Okay," I said, "where are we going for brunch?" I'm not someone who believes in fate in any organized way. But I believe in consequence the way I believe in contract law, not because it's poetic, but because it works. You sign an agreement with your actions. Eventually, the terms comes due. Colton signed his. The night he decided, my home was simply a backdrop for a life he wanted without me. Bryn co-signed it when she looked at what I had built and thought it was close enough to hers. Whatever came after, the freelancing, the Indiana restaurant, the LinkedIn profile that no longer said creative director, that wasn't something I arranged. It was simply the agreement settling. My father took me to dinner at Boca when the divorce was final. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my first car, which is his specific language for celebration. He raised his glass across the table and said, "Nadia, you never needed him to be who you are. You only needed to remember that." I didn't cry at the table. I didn't cry in the car. I cried a little in the elevator going up to my floor, the 38th floor, doors closed, city dropping away beneath me, and then the doors opened and I walked back into my home and made myself a cup of tea and stood at my kitchen island, the one I placed exactly right, and looked at the lake in the dark. I had built all of this myself, fought for every square inch of it, including the parts that weren't marble and glass. Eventually, there was room for something new, careful and honest and real. A structural engineer named Felix, who worked on a building connected to one of my clients, who listened, when I spoke, and didn't feel the need to fill every silence, and who the first time he came to my penthouse stood at that window and said quietly that I must have worked very hard for this life. I told him he had absolutely no idea. He smiled like he already knew, and I think he did. The crown I nearly lost to Colton and Bryn was never made of anything they could carry. It was built from the years before I met him, and the months I held my face completely still while I built my case, and the night I walked back into that ballroom with my champagne glass and left 2 people standing at a bar without a room to go to, or a key that opened anything that was ever truly theirs. That belongs to me. It always did. It always will.